Inheriting. I wonder how much grief and jealousy and anger has been brought about by perceived inequities in inheritances. I know of a family of 10 children, 4 of them daughters, whose mother died. The family was scattered across the country, but all of them came back for the funeral. And the family had not been particularly close, but there was no open animosity among the siblings. After the funeral, the men sat in the living room of the family home, and the daughters and daughters-in-law began to sort through their mother's clothes so that their father wouldn't have to do it alone. However, it was that when they came to their mother's jewelry box that trouble began. There were several pieces in the box that had been in the family for 3-4 generations and were very valuable. And the women began arguing about who should get which pieces. Their voices could be clearly heard in the living room where the men sat. And as name-calling began, their father began to cry. The tears rolled down his cheeks silently at first, and then he began to sob. One daughter angrily burst from the bedroom to demand that her father help her, but she stopped short when she saw his grief. She knelt before him and begged his forgiveness. And one by one, the other women joined her, surrounding their father, crying with him, knowing how close they had come to separating their family. Arms around each other, they encircled their father in a group hug, and they realized that their love for each other was more important than their mother's possessions. How did they solve the distribution of the jewelry and glassware and other sentimental items? They put numbers on each piece, and then the children drew numbers until all was gone. In our gospel lesson this morning, we have a similar situation, a story of greed and dissension. We don't know the particulars of the story, but we can see that one brother felt that he was being cheated. By law, the eldest brother received twice as much as all the other boys together in the family. And this brother wanted Jesus to make sure that he was getting what he felt he should have. But notice what Jesus said. Watch out and guard yourselves from every kind of greed, because a person's true life is not made up of the things he owns, no matter how rich he may be. Jesus was not going to arbitrate the dispute because he knew that that wasn't really the problem. What was wrong was the greed that was in that man's heart. He didn't want what was best for his brother. He wanted what he wanted for himself. Jesus saw into this man's soul and knew that wealth could not cure his greed. And then he told the parable of the rich man. Note that Jesus did not condemn wealth in this story. He didn't say, "Woe to all wealthy people." Instead, he said, "This is how it is with those who pile up riches for themselves, but who are not rich in God's sight." It seems to me that a great many people in our world are trying to pile up riches for themselves. To some people, a huge bank account is an end in itself. They are never satisfied at how high that account balance may be. They become workaholics, often stressing their bodies to a point in which they become ill. Compared to the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world, we are rich. We are constantly buying more and more things. But do all these things make us happy? And how much of our riches do we share with other people? 4%, 6%, 10%, 15%? If you were to die today, would you be able to give a good account of your stewardship of your riches to God? William Deal, a Lutheran layman, wrote a book several years ago called The Monday Connection. And the book deals with how we connect what we hear and do here on a Sunday morning in church with our lives for the rest of the week. Bill talks about what he calls the theology of enough. He says that each one of us must decide just what is enough for us. Those who have attended the adult Sunday school class will remember the same message by Shane Claiborne in the Animate series. When Bill Dill was an executive at Bethlehem Steel in Allentown, he refused some of the perks that the other executives felt were their due. For instance, as vice president, he was assigned a parking space in the parking garage one floor closer to his office, and he refused it and kept parking with the employees that had lower positions in the company. He also refused to have his office redecorated because it had been done 6 months before when the previous person worked there. Bill Dill was a very wealthy man, but he and his wife lived simply. Who is rich in God's sight? Our second lesson gives us some insight into that. Paul says that in our baptism we died, and we were raised to life with Christ. It is Jesus Christ on whom we should center our thoughts, not the things here on earth. And a relationship with God is worth more than all the money that we could earn in a lifetime. And yet, we must be careful that we do not deny our earthly heritage either. This is one point where we Lutherans differ from other denominations, or at least some of them. We don't call the earth evil, nor do we retreat from it. We are in the world, just as Jesus came into the world, but we are not of the world. Material wealth, or the satisfactions of our desires, are not paramount in our lives. But as we live in the world, we should see what we have been given by God to transform the world for God. In baptism, we put on a new nature, but do we let that nature shine through our lives? Are we different from the non-Christians who are our neighbors? In baptism, since baptism, Christ has dwelled in each of us, and he can work through us if we let him. Our words and our examples can help others. The current slogan for the evangelical Lutheran churches in America is God's work, our hands. How are your hands? How are my hands doing God's work? Paul goes on to say, but now you must get rid of all these things: anger, passion, and hateful feelings. No insults or obscene talks must ever come from your lips. Do not lie to one another, for you have put off the old self with its habits and have put on the new. These vices are evidence of a vengeful disposition, and these are all things that can break our relationships and separate us from our fellow human beings. Of course, we must be careful when reading passages like this that we don't make them into law. We must remember that we get rid of all these feelings as a response for what God has already done for us, not so that we can work our way to heaven. So what is most important in your life? Is it your bank account, your home, your car, your family, or is it God? Remember that what is most important is what you love the most, and what you love the most is what you worship. Do you worship God, or does something else come first? I pray that the God who loves us so much that Jesus came to earth to die for us, I pray that God comes first in your life, not your possessions. Amen.